Across the vast expanse of time, mythologies have forged the world. From the depths of chaos to the flames of distant realms, every culture has woven tales of gods, heroes, and celestial wonders. Welcome to Myth, your mythological portal. Subscribe for more epic journeys. Visit myth2myth.com and discover all our products. Where beauty's touch melts iron and ignites war. When Cronus cast the severed remains of Uranos into the sea, white foam surged, and from its swirling heart emerged a brilliance unmatched. From that tempest, a fully grown woman rose, hovering above the waves before her feet kissed the earth. Her skin bore the hue of dawn upon seashells, her hair shimmered like golden grain under Helios's gaze. The Horai, daughters of Zeus and Themis, cloaked her in robes embroidered with gold and led her to Olympus. The Charites wove garlands of myrtle and roses for her hair, and Eros, primordial force already present before the shaping of the world, fluttered around her, loosing desire into existence. Though later poets would call him the son of Aphrodite, we uphold the older truth, that Eros was born of chaos, an eternal power predating even the gods themselves. The goddess Aphrodite needed no lineage to assert her dominion. She was older than thrones, younger than memory, the first to teach that longing could undo kings. Even Zeus felt his will falter beneath her smile. With each step, she left not footprints, but aching hearts. Seas calmed or roared according to her moods. Lovers built temples in her name. Poets dared to carve her likeness in stone, hoping the act might win a favor. But desire is a fire no hearth can contain. Between the clang of Hephaestus's anvil and the gleam of Athena's spear, the tale of Aphrodite rises. A story of marriage, betrayal, artistry, and prophecy. Beauty will test bonds, creation will blur with passion, and far off, the seeds of war will be sown with a single apple. In the shimmer between foam and flame, the unstoppable force prepares to move. Aphrodite remembers no darkness. Her first memory is the moment water kissed light, and light became flesh. The sea foam churned until it took form, and from it rose a woman, whole and radiant. As she stepped onto the shores of Cyprus, grass sprouted beneath her bare feet, as if the earth itself wished to adorn her. Tritons blew conch shells, doves circled above, and the Horai clothed her in luminous fabric, fastening a girdle at her waist that whispered of persuasion. Peitho, the daemon of seductive speech, was already at her side, weaving spring flowers into her hair. "You will not need my help," she laughed, but Aphrodite smiled. No force moves hearts like the promise of sweetness. The newborn goddess saw her reflection in the calm sea and did not blush. From afar, Eros, the archetype of longing born at the dawn of time, approached with bow in hand, only to lower it in reverence, recognizing in her a power akin to his own. Even the Charites, Aglaia, Thaleia, Euphrosyne, who existed to adorn what was already beautiful, found themselves enhanced. Aphrodite's presence made colors richer, skin softer, even the hum of bees more harmonious. Yet something in her gaze unsettled the world, a certainty that love is neither gentle nor safe. Behind her eyes a tempest lived. In that instant, destinies shifted. Islands raised altars in her name. Sailors called upon her in times of calm. But atop Olympus, some whispered that beauty without anchor might unmake the fragile order the gods had carved from chaos. Still, the inevitable could not be delayed. Desire had taken shape, and neither gods nor mortals would ever again be free from its embrace. Zeus gazed across Olympus and saw discord blooming in the wake of Aphrodite's arrival. Gods quarreled over who might claim her hand, jealousies sharpened like blades, alliances frayed like worn cloth. Hera's lips thinned, Poseidon poured more wine than usual, even solemn Apollo faltered in his song as she passed. To avert a divine conflict, Zeus, himself no stranger to desire, issued a decree. The goddess of love shall be wed to Hephaestus. The choice stunned many. Hephaestus, son of Hera, master of forge and flame, still bore the scars of his mother's rejection and Zeus's wrath. He limped as he walked, his broad shoulders hunched from long years at the anvil, yet his hands shaped metal as if coaxing melody from stone. Zeus's reasoning was coldly pragmatic, to bind beauty to craft, perhaps taming both. On the appointed day, the gods assembled. The Charites danced, the Horai scattered threads of saffron, the Musai sang hymns of reconciliation. Aphrodite stood radiant, draped in fabrics dyed by the Horai in hues of crocus and hyacinth, her girdle fastened with a clasp of gold. Beside her stood Hephaestus, robed in the crimson cloth of the forge, his beard scented with bronze and smoke. He offered her a ring forged from molten gold, shaped in silence beneath the mountain. She returned a smile that never reached her eyes. The union was sanctified by Zeus and witnessed by Hera, whose hand still bore faint impressions from the throne Hephaestus had once crafted. The Charites bound the couple's wrists with an embroidered ribbon. Hephaestus perhaps believed that love might soften the edges of exile. Aphrodite resolved to play her role, though a quiet laughter stirred within her, was a goddess of love to be bound by decree. The stage was not set for domestic harmony, but for one of Olympus's most entangled affairs. Somewhere among the assembly, the eyes of Eris burned and the air between love and war began to crackle. The wedding feast shimmered like a vivid tableau. Tables bowed beneath the weight of ambrosia-soaked fruits, honey cakes adorned with pomegranate seeds, and roasted boar served upon bronze platters. The Cyclopes had hammered towering lampstands, each flame burning like a miniature sun. A golden nectar, fragrant with resin and the echo of thunder, was poured into goblets encrusted with gems. The Mausai sang of the union between flame and foam, while nymphs danced in circles, their steps leaving damp petals upon the marble floor. Aphrodite sat beside her husband, her posture flawless, her gaze adrift. She wore the golden girdle that promised irresistible allure. Even the glances of distant guests warmed when her eyes passed over them. Across from her sat Aglaia, the youngest of the Charites, her eyes lowered. One day, she would quietly capture Hephaestus's notice. For now, Hephaestus watched his bride through a veil of conflicting emotions. He admired the curve of her neck, the way the lamplight played upon her skin, yet he knew she had not chosen him. To mask his unease, he tapped rhythms upon his cup, his mind drifting to levers and hinges. Meanwhile, Ares leaned against a column entwined with ivy, clad in bronze cuirass and crimson cloak. He raised a toast to the union with feigned cheer, but each chuckle veiled a hunger. The net of Hephaestus already lay prepared at home, woven of threads so fine they could not be seen. Yet the heart of the war god was already tangled in cords only he could not sever. Aphrodite felt their gazes, the earnest one from Hephaestus, the smoldering one from Ares. She smiled at no one in particular. The goddess of longing was bound in marriage, but no vow could bind her power. The feast continued with laughter and lyres, yet beneath the joy, sharp jealousy and coiled desire waited patiently for an opening. Hammered iron in the forge cannot silence the whisper of the battlefield. Soon after the wedding, Ares found reasons to linger near the chambers of Aphrodite. He was not subtle. His voice echoed through the colonnades. His armor clinked upon the marble floors. His laughter rumbled like distant thunder. He recounted tales of skirmishes, shields splintered, spears shattered. Aphrodite listened, half amused, half intrigued. The god of war was proud, yet his presence exuded a raw vitality that made even goddesses glance twice. Where Hephaestus bore the scent of coal and oil, Ares carried the aroma of sweat and laurel. He boasted of his conquests, but when he leaned close to her, his tone softened, filled with reverence. "Your beauty," he murmured, "could halt armies." She tilted her head. "And your spear," she replied, letting the question linger in the air. They spoke at banquets, at dawn upon mist-veiled terraces, and in gardens where roses bloomed at her passing. Meanwhile, Eros, the ancient force of desire, drifted between them, his arrows tipped not with gold or lead, but with inevitability. Helios, who sees all, sometimes caught their glances and narrowed his gaze. Hera noticed as well, her own jealousy stirred by memories of Zeus's endless liaisons. Hephaestus burned less brightly to Aphrodite than did this brash warrior whose thirst for conflict mirrored her own affinity for disruption. Yet Ares's interest was not merely of the flesh. He felt affirmed by her gaze. The goddess of love courted war not out of bloodlust, but because passion finds its fullest strength at the edges of extremes. When their hands brushed near a column draped in wisteria, a current surged through Olympus. The balance Zeus had sought in arranging their union was already shifting. Beauty and battle had begun to align, and the force they formed would not be restrained by vows or nets. Far beneath the golden halls of Olympus, the forge of Hephaestus glowed with subdued light. The god of fire and craftsmanship could shape lifeless metal into work so exquisite that even the heart of Aphrodite had once faltered. Yet now, his workshop felt colder. The marriage bed he had forged for his wife lay empty more nights than not. He hammered bronze into cauldrons and axes, but his thoughts wandered to murmurs that passed through bronze-lined walls. He knew she slipped away at odd hours. He heard laughter borne on breezes from groves, not from hearths. He remembered the day he crafted the throne for Hera, a masterpiece turned into a snare after her rejection. Now he felt a similar rejection, though less overt. Hephaestus did not curse or wail. He created. He shaped bracelets of fine intertwining vines, fastened with clasps that only he could unlock. He beat silver into mirrors that revealed not only faces, but the hidden currents of intention. Each strike of his hammer released frustration, each twist of metal transmuted pain. At times the charities visited his forge, bringing with them laughter and the scent of citrus into the smoky air. Aglaia, shy and radiant, would hand him his tools. Her fingers brushed his, and warmth sparked between them. Yet he turned back to his anvil, resisting the temptation of a kindness he had not yet earned. In the glow of his coals, he conceived a plan. If love could betray, craft could bear witness. Just as he had once bound Hera in a throne to make her feel the sting of rejection, he would now forge something to reveal the truth of betrayal. He began gathering strands of gold fine as spider silk. The net would be invisible, silent, and unbreakable. For now, he did not fasten it above the bed. He wound it like a thought, quiet, patient, and waited. Eris's courtship was as direct as the thrust of a spear. One twilight, when the sky was painted in hues of purple and gold, he approached Aphrodite near a fountain carved from white marble. "Come," he said, offering his hand, calloused and marked with the wear of battle. "There is a grove beyond the eastern ridge, where the olive trees are as old as the Titans. No one will follow us." Aphrodite looked at his hand, rough with scars, then at her own, soft and perfumed. Curiosity stirred. She placed her fingers in his. The two moved like a shadow through the halls of Olympus, past statues of Zeus and Hera, past Hephaestus's forge, where a faint clang still echoed, past nymphs bearing amphorae. Outside, the air cooled. Cicadas sang. They walked beneath laurels and pines until marble yielded to earth. The grove Ares had chosen was hidden behind tall grasses and wildflowers. Moonlight filtered through olive branches, casting dappled silver across the ground. Ares, unaccustomed to subtlety, spoke in a voice surprisingly tender. He spoke not of war, but of sleepless nights during campaigns, when he calmed his blood by imagining beauty. Aphrodite listened. Then she spoke of her own solitude, the paradox of being loved by all, yet given away by decree. When he brushed a curl from her cheek, she did not pull away. Desire unfolded, slowly at first, then like a wave breaking. The god of war and the goddess of love embraced, and the world held its breath. Far above, the stars bore silent witness. A nightingale sang. The horizon glowed faintly with the light of Hephaestus's forge. In that moment, passion outweighed duty. They did not think of consequences. Ares made no vows. Aphrodite offered no promises. Yet bonds forged in shadow often echo louder than oaths spoken in daylight. Somewhere, Eros smiled. Hidden among olive leaves and the scent of wild thyme, the bond between Aphrodite and Ares deepened. They met often in that secret grove. At times, Aphrodite arrived crowned in pearls, the girdle of persuasion drawn tight around her waist. At others, she came with her hair unbound and her laughter softened. Ares removed his bronze cuirass and sword, laying them beside a stone, revealing scars etched from battles past. They spoke of things none else heard, Aphrodite's pain at being treated as a prize rather than a being of will, Ares' unceasing hunger for conflict, without which he felt empty. They shared the sting they both felt, of Hera's judgments and Zeus's decrees, which bent lives without ever asking hearts. With each meeting, a new intensity arose. When they kissed, flowers bloomed out of season. When they lay together, the air grew warm. From their union, the seeds of new daimons were sown. First came Harmonia, the personification of concord, a curious child for deities of desire and war. Later came Phobos and Deimos, twin spirits of panic and dread, who would someday flank their father's chariot across the field of battle. In later generations, some would call Eros their son, though he preceded them all, a reminder that love has the power to rewrite even lineage. Even when apart, Ares thought of Aphrodite's scent amidst the stench of blood, while she found that the clang of the forge brought her less solace than the crash of shields. Their connection was not forged in tenderness, but in intensity. Each one stoked the other's extremes, yet passion always leaves its echo. In a world where Helios sees all from his blazing chariot and Hephaestus listens behind walls of bronze, secrets leave traces. For now, however, the grove offered shade from Olympus's gaze. Desire cannot remain hidden forever, but for a time love and war lay entwined, undisturbed. No betrayal escapes the gaze of Helios, the god of the sun who drives his golden chariot across the heavens, sees all by day and remembers by night. One afternoon, as he guided his steeds past the gleaming heights of Olympus, he looked down and beheld two divine bodies entwined among wildflowers. He recognized the golden hair and pearled skin of Aphrodite and the battle-scarred shoulders of Ares. His chariot wavered as he considered what to do. Accustomed to illuminating truth, he weighed loyalty against disorder. Hephaestus, though once cast down, had shown kindness to the children of Helios. Ares, by contrast, often disregarded the sun god's omens in battle. Helios chose to speak. That evening, after bathing his horses in the stream of Oceanus, Helios ascended the path to the forge. The god of the sun entered the workshop, where Hephaestus was laboring. The ringing of hammer ceased. Helios spoke plainly, voice bright as day, and told what he had seen. Hephaestus listened, his expression unreadable. The sun god had fulfilled his duty. Secrets weigh heavy, even on those born of light. Meanwhile, Poseidon, lord of the sea, sensed a shift. The waves around Cyprus struck the shore with unusual force. Fish leapt and twisted, as if stirred by unseen currents. Aphrodite's dominion was not only in the heavens, but in the sea, and the ocean now echoed the unrest of her heart. On land, the nymph Echo whispered the lovers' names into stone crevices, where their syllables reverberated faintly for those who dared to listen. The cosmos was no longer blind. Only the lovers, bound to each other in desire, had not yet seen the net drawing near. Hephaestus stared at Helios until the sun god departed. A muscle ticked in his jaw, but he did not curse. Betrayal was not new to him. His own mother had cast him down from Olympus. His father had hurled him once more. Yet his marriage, though forged by decree, had been his, a pact he had hoped might temper loneliness. Now Helios's words echoed louder than any hammer strike. He walked to his bench and unrolled the nearly invisible golden net he had begun to weave. Each strand was finer than a hair, each link forged with binding enchantments taught by the Cyclopes. The net shimmered faintly, like sunlight caught in morning dew. He had designed it to descend from the ceiling at the slightest touch, to tighten with the smallest movement, to hold gods no matter their strength. Hephaestus did not take pleasure in humiliating his wife or Ares. He did not seek spectacle for its own sake, but he believed that truth, once unveiled, could restore balance. He worked through the night, etching sacred sigils of binding and whispering incantations into the metal. He recalled the last time he had trapped a god, his own mother, and how Dionysus had persuaded him to release her. Then, too, he had forged bonds to teach a lesson. Now he foresaw no gentle mediator. He did not yet imagine Poseidon would intercede. He only knew that his craft could enforce honesty more surely than Zeus's proclamations. Hephaestus's heart hardened like quenched bronze. He would not spring the trap in haste. He would wait, until love and war lay entwined upon his own marriage bed. Then, with calm hands and steady voice, he would summon the gods to witness the truth. Until that moment, the net lay coiled, silent, patient, inevitable. Far from Olympus, across the sea on the island of Cyprus, Aphrodite's power was both revered and defied. In the city of Amathus lived the Propoetides, daughters of a proud and ancient line who dared to reject the divinity of the goddess. They mocked her rites, laughed at her devotees, and refused to adorn themselves in her honor. Worse still, they gave their bodies to strangers, not from need, but from disdain, violating the sacred bond between desire and reverence. Why bow to a fickle goddess, they jeered, exposing themselves in the public squares without shame. Their laughter carried not joy, but contempt. Aphrodite, offended in her very essence, considered abandoning her cities and letting beasts roam the streets unchecked. But she distinguished between the land and its people. "The plains have done no wrong," she said, "but these women shall pay the price for their impiety." She considered punishments between exile and death, and chose transformation. She observed the hardness that had taken root in them, their scorn for modesty, the erosion of reverence, and decided that their moral rigidity would become physical. She stripped them of the ability to blush. Their skin thickened, their blood turned pale, their expressions froze. First, their flesh took on the chill of marble. Then, their limbs stiffened. Finally, they became statues with hollow eyes and lifeless posture. No longer women, they were monuments to insolence, stone vessels devoid of soul. Thus were born the first prostitutes, and the first among mortals to be petrified by the goddess of love, not through wrathful violence, but through the poetic justice of transformation. Word of their fate spread throughout Cyprus, carried by traders and whispered by nymphs. In time, a sculptor would hear of their disgrace and recoil. The infamy of the Propoetides did not end with their stillness. It sowed a revulsion that would lead a man named Pygmalion to seek perfection not in living women, but in ivory. Aphrodite's vengeance would become, paradoxically, the spark of her next miracle. In Paphos, the wealthiest city of Cyprus, lived Pygmalion, a sculptor whose craft rivaled that of Daedalus himself. When he beheld the Propoetides wasting their lives in impiety and shamelessness, he felt revulsion. If such are women, he thought, better to remain alone. Over time, his disdain hardened into a vow of chastity. He turned away from the halls of revelry and the painted faces of courtesans, pouring his longing instead into marble and ivory. He carved heroes and gods for temples, capturing the might of Zeus, the grace of Apollo. Yet no work satisfied him. Each creation seemed a flawed echo of a broken world. One day, as the sea breeze carried the scent of myrtle and salt, a thought struck him. He selected a block of ivory, white as snow, and imagined not a woman as she was, but as she ought to be. For weeks he labored, his chisel sounding like the strings of a lyre. He smoothed curves, hollowed eyes, shaped fingers so delicate they seemed ready to stir. He gave her a softness at the corners of her lips that hinted at life, and a tilt of the chin that implied modesty. When he laid down his tools, he trembled. Before him stood a figure more flawless than any living woman. She bore neither the coarse cruelty of the Propoetides nor the painted vice of the pleasure houses, only purity and composure. He gave her no name. Names belong to the living. Still, he spoke to her as one speaks before an idol, in a hushed voice with reverent words. He told her of sunlit days and storm-tossed nights, of his dismay at impious behavior and his longing for something higher. It mattered not that she did not reply. His solitude dissolved in her presence. The statue became his agalma, a sacred object, a spiritual companion, and an obsession. In shaping her, he had sculpted his own disdain. In gazing upon her, he felt the stirrings of desire for the first time since hearing of the Propoetides' fall. His devotion was not romantic, but devotional, a private offering to the goddess who had punished the wicked. Pygmalion's affection for his creation deepened into fervent devotion. By day, he polished the ivory skin with pumice stone until it gleamed like Selene's light. By night, he laid her upon cushions dyed with Tyrian purple and whispered to her, as one would to a sacred image, though she did not hear. He adorned her with pearl necklaces and golden rings. He placed his hand upon her arm and pretended to feel pressure in return. When he kissed her, he imagined warmth answering his own. He brought her offerings he believed would delight a maiden. Smooth pebbles from the shore, sweet-scented lilies, painted balls, and tears of amber said to fall from the Heliades. Each time he touched the ivory, he marveled at the softness he believed he sensed beneath his fingertips. The more he caressed, the more he convinced himself her flesh yielded, like wax beneath the gaze of Helios. He called her the companion of his bed, though she remained still. He feared that his own strength might fracture her delicate limbs. Friends mocked him, he woos cold bone. He only smiled, never inviting them to see what he saw, a soul awaiting awakening. His mind refused to accept that she was only ivory. At times, he found himself asking her questions and pausing for replies. His household murmured that their master had lost his reason, but Pygmalion did not care. The statue had become a vessel into which he poured all the longing he had denied. When he wrapped her in fresh garments, he felt as though he clothed his own heart. In his studio, he carved no new commissions. He sat on his bench, watching how light shifted across her features. Winter's chill never froze her. Summer's heat never caused her to glisten. She was timeless, perfect, unreachable, until a festival offered him hope. The day of the Aphrodisia arrived, a festival of Aphrodite, celebrated throughout Cyprus with garlands and sacrifice. The streets filled with devotees bearing incense and leading heifers with gilded horns toward the altars. Pygmalion, who had long avoided temples since his vow of chastity, felt a stirring. If any goddess could understand longing, it was the one who inspired his every thought. He bathed, dressed in clean garments, and walked among the throng to the sanctuary. There, before the golden image of Aphrodite, he placed a basket of roses and scattered frankincense upon the coals. His hands trembled as he raised the blade to the neck of the heifer. When the animal fell and its blood hissed upon the altar, he closed his eyes and prayed. "Great goddess," he whispered, barely daring to give voice to his yearning, "if the gods grant all things, grant me as wife, one like my ivory maiden." He could not bring himself to ask that the statue be made flesh. His plea remained veiled. Yet Aphrodite, present in her festival and attuned to the hearts of mortals, heard the truth behind his words. The flames upon the altar leapt thrice, a sign of her favor. The crowd murmured in wonder. Pygmalion's heart raced. He returned home in haste. The sun had set, casting long shadows across his studio. Pygmalion lit the lamps and approached his ivory beloved, his palms damp with anticipation. He leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. For a moment, nothing changed. Then he felt warmth. Startled, he pulled back. Could it be the heat of his own breath? He touched her arm. The surface yielded. Gently, he pressed again. This time the resistance gave way like wax softened by flame. Pygmalion fell to his knees, eyes wet with awe. "Goddess," he whispered, unable to say more. The miracle had begun. The blessing of Aphrodite flowed through the ivory like sap, awakening a sleeping tree. As Pygmalion held the statue's hand, veins appeared beneath the surface. Pressing his finger to her wrist, he he felt a faint pulse. He watched in astonishment as color bloomed from her chest to her cheeks, a blush unfolding across once pale features. Her eyes, once vacant, began to shine. Lashes quivered. She inhaled deeply, as though tasting breath for the first time. The sculptor remained frozen, fearing that any motion might undo the enchantment. The statue, no longer stone, turned her head and met his gaze. Confusion passed across her face, followed by recognition. Pygmalion raised a trembling hand and touched her hair. It gave beneath his fingers like silk. He pulled her into an embrace, weeping with relief. "Alive," he whispered. She did not speak. She smiled, a quiet smile that mirrored his own. Aphrodite, unseen, watched in satisfaction. There was no thunder, no proclamation. The goddess needed no applause. She had granted life to art as a reward to a man who chose eusebeia, piety, over impiety. Pygmalion offered prayers at her unseen feet. He made sacrifices for days in gratitude. News of the miracle spread across Cyprus. Women whispered of a man who once preferred ivory to flesh until the goddess intervened. Men murmured that devotion bore fruit if offered to the right deity. Pygmalion and his living beloved were wed in a quiet ceremony. No trumpets sounded, no gods appeared, yet the union was blessed. In time she would speak and laugh. He would teach her to weave and to read. She was given the name Galatea, she who is white as milk, though some poets left her nameless. Their love was not born of passion or command, but from the transformation of longing into life. Once, Pygmalion had turned from women in revulsion. Now he learned that Aphrodite could sanctify even desire itself. 9 lunar cycles passed, each waxing and waning like the breath of the sea. In that time, the belly of the once ivory maiden, now fully alive, swelled with new life. Pygmalion, who once recoiled at the thought of mortal union, now marveled at how love could shape flesh. He gathered herbs and wove blankets. He built a cradle of carved cedar, inlaid with pearls. He sang to the unborn child songs he had composed while sculpting, melodies made of marble dust and polished stone. Galatea, now holy woman, radiated expectancy. She walked the temple of Aphrodite with her hand upon her womb, offering thanks to the goddess for every flutter within. When the moment arrived, the pains came like chisel strikes. Pygmalion paced, wringing his hands, but the goddess of childbirth, Eileithyia, guided the delivery. Galatea's cries gave way to relief as a child emerged, rosy and perfect. They named the boy Paphos, in honor of the city of his conception, and perhaps the sacred island of the goddess herself. From this line would come kings and priests who would honor Aphrodite across generations. The island would bear his name, becoming a center of her cult. Thus did the myth of Pygmalion flow back into geography, legend shaping the land. In time, from Paphos's lineage would come Eris and Hera, whose sorrowful tale would one day be told. But for now, joy filled the sculptor's home. Neighbors brought offerings. Women who once mocked him now envied the grace of his wife. Men who once laughed now sought his counsel. Pygmalion continued to sculpt, yet no work held his soul like Galatea. No stone ever warmed his hands like the sleeping child within the cradle. The power of Aphrodite had revealed itself not only as the fire of longing, but also as the gentle flame of life. Through the union of human yearning and divine favor, a new city and a new lineage had been born. The myth of Pygmalion spread beyond Cyprus, carried by sailors and poets, woven into tapestries, and whispered during festivals. Some retold it as a caution against judging all women by the faults of a few. Others saw in it proof that craft, could rival nature, and that the gods might bless creation when it honored them. Aphrodite smiled when her priests recited the tale, perhaps pleased to inspire both purity and passion. The sculptor who once scorned women came to cherish one. The goddess who punished the Propoetides also rewarded those who revered her. Hephaestus too may have remembered that his own works could alter fate. His forged net would soon do so. Artists across Hellas began carving female figures with greater care, hoping to capture a fragment of Galatea's spirit. Some say this marked the beginning of statue cults, devotees tending divine images in hope that breath might fill them. Others see in the story a metaphor, that love animates what would otherwise remain lifeless. The myth also reflects upon the goddess herself. Born from sea foam, she gives flesh to foam. She can freeze those who scorn her and melt those who adore her. Between the Propoetides and Galatea, between stone and skin, Aphrodite's justice finds balance. In this episode, Pygmalion's story mirrors that of Hephaestus. Both the sculptor and the smith craft what binds and liberates. Both seek to shape destiny through art. Both learn that when gods intervene, art breathes and binds beyond its maker's intent. And so, as we leave Cyprus and return to Olympus, we carry the knowledge that beauty, love, and creation are not separate forces, but threads of a single tapestry, woven by divine hands and mortal hearts alike. In the months that followed Hephaestus's betrayal and Pygmalion's miracle, the roles of Aphrodite multiplied. She was at once wife, lover, mother, and patroness. From her union with Eris were born children who would shape the fates of both gods and mortals. Eros, already a primordial force, now drifted with pride, at times poetically named her son, to emphasize their shared domain over desire. Though this genealogy ties him to Aphrodite in mythic song, in our tradition he remains one of the first cosmic principles, born from chaos, present before even the Titans. Harmonia, born of love and war, radiated serenity. One day, she would marry Cadmus, founder of Thebes, uniting separate strands of myth. Phobos and Deimos, pale and fierce, clung to their father's chariot, sowing panic and dread wherever they passed. When Ares marched to battle, spears quivered not only at the sight of the war god, but at the terror embodied by his twin sons. Aphrodite cradled these children with the same hands that had once held Paphos. To some, she whispered lullabies. To others, she taught the art of seduction or the craft of fear. Hera watched with narrowed eyes. Athena, not yet born, pressed against the skull of Zeus, sensing a rival force stirring. Poseidon, attuned to the rhythms of change, felt the waves rise when Aphrodite nursed her children of strife. Among mortals, amulets were fashioned invoking Deimos to frighten enemies and Harmonia to mend families. The goddess's offspring embodied extremes, concord and horror, longing and dread. Their very existence revealed that the power of love does not always lead to peace. It may birth terror as easily as harmony. This duality would echo in myths yet to unfold. Helen, born of seduction, would ignite a war. The judgment of Paris, shaped by Aphrodite's hand, would bring about the fall of Troy. In our tale, this harvest of love and war shows that Aphrodite's reach molds not only hearts, but battlefields. She is not merely goddess of affection. Within her arms lie seeds of harmony and terror, left for gods and mortals alike to reap. Days turned to weeks as Hephaestus refined his net. He perfected the mechanism that would trigger its descent. He polished the golden threads until they vanished in the light, and yet he delayed its use. Though he knew of Aphrodite's secret meetings with Ares, he postponed the trap. Part of his hesitation came from pride. He would not act until the moment of highest exposure. Part came from a tenderness that still lingered. Despite betrayal, he continued to admire her beauty. And he understood that wrath alone could not be the only fire to shape his craft. While he waited, he poured his strength into other works. He forged shields for heroes not yet born, etching into the bronze the constellations and the sacred rivers. He molded a helm of invisibility at the request of Hades, transmuting shadow into metal. He crafted ornate lamps for the sanctuary of Demeter, their flames flickering like golden wheat in harvest wind. He even began to design weapons of justice for mortals, creations born from his own pain and exclusion. In doing so, he remembered that his fire could warm as well as scorch. The net remained one project among many. It lay coiled, gleaming softly from time to time, like a thought waiting to be spoken. Hephaestus also journeyed to Lemnos, where mortals honored him with offerings and festivals. The warmth he received from humankind softened the sting of divine betrayal. He watched children play with tin horses he had shaped, and farmers plow the earth with blades he had forged. He remembered that his fire could guard as well as punish. The day would come when his net would fall, revealing unfaithfulness to all Olympus. But for now he chose to be more than a wronged husband. He would be the craftsman who arms the gods and shelters the weak. Vengeance could wait. Craft would endure. Hera ruled over marriage, though her own union with Zeus was a tapestry woven from betrayal and endurance. When whispers of Aphrodite's affair with Eris reached her ears, the queen of the gods did not erupt in fury. She watched. She remembered. She recalled the humiliation brought by Zeus's many consorts, Io, Europa, and countless others. She remembered the moment she was bound to her son's throne, wrists gripped by golden serpents, and the laughter of the gods echoing around her. Hephaestus's net had once forced her to face her own cruelty. Now another net was being woven, this time for the goddess of love. Hera walked the halls of Olympus with deliberate steps, chin lifted. She passed Aphrodite in a corridor and let her gaze linger just a heartbeat longer. The goddess of love smiled, unbothered. Hera's eyes then turned to Ares, her son, polishing his spear, unaware. Ares had always been her favored child, a mirror of her wrath. Yet now his reckless passion mirrored the faults of Zeus himself. Hera felt an unusual sympathy for Hephaestus, perhaps because she recognized in his silent rage the echo of her own long-held resentment. She did not chastise Aphrodite. She did not rebuke Ares. Instead, she stored the knowledge away as a weapon. Hera knew that true power lies not only in thunderbolts, but in secrets. When the trap would spring, she would be ready. She would be among the first to laugh, not in cruelty, but in the release of years of silent scorn. Still, she did not forget that shame leaves scars. When in time she aided Jason or favored other heroes, when she offered blessings or withheld them, the image of Aphrodite entangled would color her judgments. The cold gaze of Hera in this moment is not merely censure, it is calculation. A divine reckoning from a goddess whose domain has been trespassed too many times. She chooses not to intervene, knowing that the consequences of desire need no help to unfold. Though desire may strike as lightning, persuasion moves like a river carving stone, slowly, irresistibly. Peitho, daemon of persuasion and seduction, seldom takes center stage in myth, yet she is always near Aphrodite. Within the halls of Olympus, she whispers to gods and mortals alike. It was Peitho who first whispered to Zeus that binding Aphrodite to Hephaestus might soothe divine rivalries. It was she who taught Aphrodite the precise word to still Ares's impatience. She anointed the golden girdle of the goddess with layers of irresistible charm. When Pygmalion knelt before the altar, it was Peitho's influence that shaped the cadence of his prayer. When the three goddesses would one day present themselves to Paris, it would be Peitho who would cloak Aphrodite's promises in sweetness. In this episode, Peitho moves more like fragrance than shadow. She brushes the lips of Aglaia, encouraging a shy smile as she hands Hephaestus his tools. She guides Ares's tongue so that his flattery rings true. She even draws near to Hera, whispering that silence may wield more power than rebuke. Persuasion is not vile manipulation. It is an art that appeals to the spirit and awakens the will. It honors the listener even as it makes certain choices more alluring. Peitho's presence reminds us that love is not only of the flesh, but also of the voice. Words may court as surely as touch. While Eros's arrows pierce the heart, Peitho's words guide the hand. Throughout our tale, whenever a character chooses a path, we feel the subtle weight of Peitho tipping the scale. She is Aphrodite's unseen advisor, ensuring that longing builds bridges rather than burns them. In future stories, when speeches sway armies and heroes enchant monsters with words, remember, the goddess of persuasion first honed her craft in the court of love. The influence of Aphrodite rippled through the affairs of mortals. Fishermen who prayed to Poseidon found their thoughts drifting to lovers waiting on the shore. Wives at the loom felt sudden longing for husbands gone to war. Youths composed verses they dared not speak aloud. The goddess's power did not discriminate. It touched both kings and shepherds. In Sparta, Helen, still bound to Menelaus, spent sleepless nights, unaware that she would soon be promised as a prize to a Trojan prince. In Thebes, Cadmus felt pulled toward distant lands where harmony awaited. In Attica, the father of Theseus dreamed of a union that would bring forth a hero. This scene reminds us that desire, once unleashed, does not remain confined to Olympus. It fills the hearts of mortals, provoking choices that shape fate. Some channel this force to build families, others fall prey to ruinous obsessions. Poets would later blame Aphrodite for causing Hippolytus to scorn women and thus incur the wrath of Artemis, or for making Phaedra fall in love with her stepson. Sailors would drown, lured by the voices of sea maidens. Queens would betray thrones for love. In our tale, we glimpse these threads. A young shepherd on Mount Ida gazes at a golden apple and wonders what it means to be called the fairest. A smith in Athens hammers a ring while thinking of a girl who sells olives. Even beasts respond. Doves coo louder, swans entwine their necks. The force of Aphrodite reveals itself not only in epic passion, but in daily longing. This episode reminds us that the domain of the goddess is vast. Love is both creator and destroyer, nurturing and jealous. It strengthens communities through marriage and tears them apart through betrayal. It is a power no one fully commands, not even the goddess herself. Beauty commands, and it disturbs. Though the gifts of Aphrodite bring delight, they also carry weight. Narcissus, though a man, would one day fall in love with his own reflection and waste away. Hippomenes and Atalanta, misusing golden apples, would be turned into lions. Even the gods paid. The affairs of Zeus roused Hera's fury, bringing ruin to Io, Semele, and Leto. In this scene, we contemplate the consequences of the goddess's allure. Once, Aphrodite caused Helios to turn his gaze astray, nearly unraveling the cycle of day and night. She stirred the heart of Selene toward Endymion. She breathed madness into the women of Lemnos, who slaughtered their husbands. She cursed Myrrha with unnatural longing for boasting of her beauty, and thus tragedy followed. Beauty invites competition, and competition begets strife. The Propoetides lost their humanity. The Cerastes were changed into horned beasts. Warriors slain in battle might name not only Ares, but the spark of desire as cause. Even Aphrodite herself was not immune. Wounded by a mortal during the war at Troy, she fled weeping to Olympus, revealing that even a goddess may bleed. This scene urges the listener to see beauty not as benign ornament, but as a force with a price. The girdle that bestows persuasion can bind as much as it frees. The apple soon to be cast will promise glory, but deliver ruin. The unstoppable power of the goddess is not inherently noble nor wicked. It is a force like fire. It warms, cooks, forges, but it also scorches. Hephaestus shapes it, Zeus fears it, Hera resents it, mortals adore it, and suffer for it. As we near the climax, this reflection sets the stage. When Eris hurls her golden apple, it will strike not only the ground, but the essence of beauty's double-edged nature, unleashing a chain of fates that shall test both kings and gods. Years later, the gods gathered upon Mount Pelion to celebrate the wedding of Peleus, son of Aeacus, and Thetis, daughter of Nereus. This union had been decreed by Zeus, who sought to divert a prophecy that the son of Thetis would surpass his father. By binding her to a mortal, he hoped to avert the rise of a divine rival. The Muses sang. The Horai adorned the bridal chamber with blossoms. Sea nymphs danced along the shore. Every god received an invitation, save one. Eris, goddess of discord, discovered her exclusion and burned with wrath. For ages she had taken delight in sowing strife among mortals and immortals alike. To be shunned from such a feast wounded her pride. She lingered at the edge of the celebration, unseen. She watched Hera adjust the bridal veil, listened to Zeus offer blessings, and observed Aphrodite's laughter mingle with Artemis's distant gaze. Hatred honed her intent. Strife needed a stage. She plucked a golden apple from the grove of the Hesperides and carved upon its skin the gleaming words, Ti Callistii, to the fairest. Then she waited. As the guests raised their cups, Eris entered the hall unnoticed. The music faltered. Without a word, she rolled the apple across the marble floor where it came to rest at the feet of Aphrodite, Athena, and Hera. All eyes fixed upon the shining fruit. Murmurs rose. It was beautiful, perfectly rounded, gleaming as if forged in Hephaestus's own fire. Each goddess reached for it, then paused. Suspicion flickered in their eyes. Eris vanished into shadow, smiling. She had no need to remain. Discord had taken root, nourished by vanity. The unworthy guest had delivered her gift. From a slight came an apple. From an apple would come a judgment. And from that judgment, war. Silence blanketed the hall as Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite fixed their eyes upon the golden apple. Each goddess believed herself the fairest. Hera, queen of Olympus, radiated regal authority. Athena, goddess of wisdom and war, gleamed with austere grace. Aphrodite shimmered with a sensual allure that stirred all who beheld her. It must be mine, each one thought. Aphrodite brushed her fingers over the apple's surface, feeling its cool weight. Hera's nostrils flared. Athena's lips tightened. Zeus, observing the mounting tension, recalled what transpired when gods contended over beauty. Betrayals, upheavals, wars among immortals and mortals alike. He refused to pass judgment. "This is a quarrel fit for mortals," he declared. He summoned Hermes and charged him with leading the goddesses to the slopes of Mount Ida, near the walls of Troy. There, a shepherd prince named Paris would decide whose claim held merit. Hermes, ever tactful, bowed and gestured for the three to follow. Hera grumbled but complied. Athena adjusted her peplos and strode ahead. Aphrodite smiled, confident yet curious. As they departed, murmurs rippled among the divine assembly. Some gods whispered wagers, others exchanged uneasy glances. Eris had vanished, her purpose fulfilled. Upon Mount Ida, goats grazed and bees droned. Paris, son of Priam, lived in pastoral peace, unaware that his choice would entwine him with mythic destiny. He would not merely judge an apple, he would determine which goddess would shape his fate. In this scene, the apple becomes more than a token. It is the hinge between divine jealousy and mortal suffering. It embodies the cost of vanity, the spark of fate. Its inscription promises glory. Its weight portends blood. The goddess of love will soon test whether persuasion may triumph over power and wisdom. The seeds of the Trojan War now rest within a single fruit. Hermes led the three goddesses away from Olympus, his winged sandals stirring barely a whisper of wind. On the slopes of Mount Ida, Paris tended his flocks. He looked up at the sudden brilliance, and for a heartbeat, thought stars had fallen to earth. Hermes approached and spoke clearly. "Judge which goddess is the fairest. Your decision shall be binding." Paris's breath caught. To defy a divine summons would be folly. To choose among goddesses, perilous. Hera stepped forward first. She raised her chin, regal, her eyes gleaming with authority. "If you choose me," she declared, her voice echoing like bronze, "you shall rule over all men. Kingship, wealth, and dominion will be yours." Athena followed, her spear resting at her side, the aegis glimmering faintly. Her grey eyes held the wisdom of ages. "If you choose me," she said, calm and certain, "you shall never be defeated. I will grant you skill in war, mastery in counsel, and triumph in all endeavors." Paris imagined leading armies returning laden with spoils, protected by wisdom and strength. Then Aphrodite stepped forward. She wore no armor, only robes dyed with spring flowers, as the poet of the Cypria once sang. Her hair spilled with hyacinths, violets, and roses. She laughed softly, and the sound brushed his skin like warm wind. "Paris," she whispered, voice like flowing honey. "Choose me, and I shall give you the fairest woman in the world. Helen of Sparta will be yours." His breath halted. He had heard of Helen's beauty even on these distant hills, no equal among mortals. Power and wisdom trembled before desire. He imagined Helen in his arms. He imagined envy, glory, love. Without grasping the full weight of his choice, Paris reached out and gave the apple to Aphrodite. Hera's gaze turned to stone. Athena's eyes narrowed, promising war. Hermes, ever neutral, took the apple and laid it in Aphrodite's palm. The decision was sealed. In that gesture, the fate of a city was cast, and the death songs of heroes were already forming on the wind. Though the decision had been swift, the bribes of the goddesses lingered in Paris's thoughts. Hera's offer whispered of temples and tributes, of subjects bending the knee and cities bowing before his rule. Athena's promise of wisdom and victory conjured visions of clever stratagems defeating mighty foes, his name etched on shields, sung in epics. But Aphrodite's gift was singular, Helen. The goddess did not merely describe beauty. She spoke of lineage, daughter of Zeus, queen of Sparta, companion to kings. She painted a vision, Helen weaving by a sunlit window, her hair shining like golden grain, her voice softer than lamb's wool. She promised that Helen would leave her husband willingly, enchanted by Paris's charm. Raised among shepherds, Paris had never known such splendor. Hera and Athena saw the tilt of his desire. They sweetened their offers, Hera with the promise of immortality, Athena with glimpses of divine foresight. But desire is a net woven by Eros and Peitho. Aphrodite's words carried the scent of myrrh and incense, the taste of honey and pomegranate. Paris's heart quickened, though he did not understand why. He did not weigh the gifts like a philosopher. His blood stirred, and that decided all. As he placed the apple in Aphrodite's hand, he did not see Hera's fists clench, nor Athena's jaw tighten. He did not hear the sea roar, echoing Poseidon's discontent. He felt only a swelling pride. He had been chosen to judge goddesses. He had won a prize. Aphrodite smiled and kissed his cheek. "Wait for me," she whispered. Hera turned away, already plotting how to strip his line of power. Athena swore to arm Hellas with cunning and bronze. The bribes had been given, the choice made. Yet none present fully grasped that the judgment was not truly about beauty, but about the catastrophic weaving of desire and destiny. Not all gods meet beauty with envy. Themis, titaness of divine law and prophetic order, observed the judgment from atop a cloud. Her eyes bore no jealousy, nor mirth. They measured. Once she had told Zeus that a child born of Metis would overthrow him. He had swallowed Metis to avert that fate. She had foretold that a god of ecstasy would rise and challenge Olympus. One day he would claim his place. Now she saw the apple roll, saw the choice cast. The scales in her hand tipped. She turned to the Moirai, the fates who spun nearby, weaving destinies into their eternal loom. Clotho spun tighter thread. Lachesis measured a line destined to end too soon. Atropos sharpened her shears. "War is fixed," murmured Themis. "The pride of a king, the wrath of a queen, the vow of a goddess, and the longing of a shepherd, these shall be threads in a tapestry soaked in blood." The Moirai whispered, their voices like wind through reeds. "Mortals call us cruel," said Atropos, "yet we cut only where deeds demand it." Themis sent a vision to a priestess in Troy, a dream of fire licking high walls, of men climbing heaps of fallen bodies. She whispered to Cassandra, but Apollo's curse twisted her words to madness. In Sparta, she stirred Helen's heart with unease, a trembling that mirrored Paris's longing. She spoke to Hera and Athena, reminding them that vengeance too must obey divine order. Even to Aphrodite, she whispered, beauty unleashes forces beyond pleasure. Her prophecy did not halt what was to come. Prophecies rarely do. It served instead as a conscience, divine awareness that the path was visible, yet chosen regardless. The scales tipped, the apple rolled, and fate, once more, bent to desire. Themis watched, not with malice, not with hope, but with sacred clarity. Her role was not to alter the future, but to weigh it. Paris returned to his flocks, apple exchanged for promise, his heart filled with anticipation and unknowing. Hera and Athena ascended back to Olympus, their smiles cold, their minds already weaving support for the sons of Achaea. Aphrodite vanished for a moment, drifting to Sparta to whisper in Helen's ear, turning a flicker into flame. In the high halls of Olympus, Hephaestus fastened his net at last. In Thebes, little Harmonia played with stones, unaware that one day a necklace would bind her fate. In Athens, poets sang hymns to beauty and warnings against hubris. On Mount Ida, Themis and the Moirai resumed their weaving, threads now tinged with gold and crimson. Zeus sat upon his throne, thunderbolt in hand, pondering whether this war should be allowed, to lighten Earth's burden of mortals, as once declared in the ancient decrees. Hera demanded retribution against Paris. Aphrodite vowed to shield the lovers. Athena whispered strategies to commanders in their dreams. Ares sharpened his spear, eager for war. Helios guided his chariot across the sky, gazing upon Troy, gleaming like a gem on the earth's brow. The seeds cast by a single apple would soon blossom into the Trojan War. Yet before that epic unfolds, other tales shall rise. Athena shall break forth from the crown of Zeus. Apollo and Artemis shall bring light and shadow. Hermes shall steal cattle and trade a lyre. Poseidon shall shake both land and sea. Demeter shall lose her daughter and shape the seasons. A god of ecstasy shall lead mortals into joy and madness. Hades shall weigh souls beneath the earth. This episode ends not with closure but with foresight. Beauty has proven unstoppable. Desire has spun its threads around gods and mortals alike. The cost of choice has been hinted at. Its reckoning is near. As the view pans from Paris's hill to the gleaming towers of Olympus, to the serene shores of Paphos, and to the ever-turning loom of the fates, we hear the soft rustle of pages turning. The next chapter awaits. From sea foam to prophecy, the tale of Aphrodite bends like a wave breaking upon cliff and shore, leaving the landscape forever changed. We witnessed how the goddess of love was bound in a marriage forged for diplomacy, yet followed passion that defied divine order. We saw a craftsman turn humiliation into craft, a sculptor turn ivory into life, and a shepherd's choice turn a golden fruit into the omen of war. We followed children born of beauty and battle, of harmony and dread, while the unseen hands of persuasion and prophecy steered each decision. At every turn, desire proved itself irresistible, whether through the embrace of a lover, the imagined perfection of a woman shaped from marble, the allure of a golden apple, or the offer of the world's most beautiful wife. Yet the force of desire bears a cost. It may birth cities like Paphos, but also destroy them like Troy. It may inspire art and invention, but also awaken envy and war. Hephaestus's net and Peitho's enchantments both entrap. One binds bodies, the other bends wills. Beauty remains unstoppable, not because it conquers all, but because it moves hearts to act, for better or for ruin. As we close this chapter, we glimpse Hephaestus returning to his forge, reforging his vow to protect with the same fervor he once punished. We see Aphrodite radiant and unwearied, her allure undiminished. We see Themis weighing choices, the Moirai weaving threads. And on the horizon we see a storm gathering, a spear poised to pierce a skull, an olive branch about to be planted, arrows soon to fly at giants, oaths forged in blood. Desire has fulfilled its course. Now wisdom shall rise. In the next episode, a warrior shall cleave open the skull of Zeus, and a goddess fully formed shall step forth, not from sea foam, but from mind. Prepare to meet Athena, daughter of strategy and sovereign thought, whose birth will shake Olympus as surely as beauty once stirred it. Subscribe for more epic journeys. Visit myth2myth.com and discover all our products.